السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Indeed, all praise and thanks are for Allah. We praise and thank Him, we seek His help and we ask His forgiveness. We take refuge in Allah from the evil of ourselves and from our sinful deeds. Whoever Allah guides, no one can mislead, and whoever He leaves to stray, no one can guide. And I bear witness that there is no one worthy of worship except Allah. He is one, having no partners. And I bear witness that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is His servant and His messenger. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon him and upon his family and his companions. Amma ba'd, to proceed. Now we're still in the first month, the month of Muharram, the first month of the new Islamic year. Yes, the year 1444 in the Hijri calendar. Now the Hijri calendar is called the Hijri calendar because it's based on the Hijrah, which is the migration, yes, or the emigration of the people and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and some of the companions, some of his companions, they migrated from Mecca to Medina. And the fact that our calendar is based on that occurrence, you see, it starts in the year of the migration, you see. The fact that this is the case highlights how important that Hijrah was, you see. Because there were all sorts of other events in the life of the Prophet ﷺ that could have been chosen as the start of the Islamic calendar, but they chose this. Umar, he established this. They chose that because it's so momentous, so important. And in fact, the Muslim community actually was transformed because in Mecca, the Muslims very small in number, yes, and oppressed or persecuted. And then after the Hijrah, the community grew and became large and strong, powerful. A lot of new Muslims and so on. So we may understand the importance of it in that way. It's also mentioned, of course, it's mentioned in the Quran. There's a reference to Hijrah and in the Sunnah. And I'll just mention one verse in relation to this, highlighting the importance. We're told in Surah Al-Baqarah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الذين آمنوا والذين هاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله أولئك يرجون رحمة الله. It's أولئك يرجون رحمة الله والله غفور رحيم. Okay, we're told that indeed those who have faith and perform the Hijrah, make Hijrah, and strive or fight, struggle in the path of Allah, they are the ones who can hope for, who can look forward to Allah's rahmah, His mercy, His compassion, His grace. And Allah is Ghafurur Rahim. He's forgiving, merciful. It's a strong statement, isn't it? That, yes, and the verb for Hijrah there, the word that's being used, is between having faith. It's mentioned after having faith. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. You see that is mentioned between faith and jihad, effectively, striving, struggling, fighting in the path of Allah. So we can see how important it is. But we may feel that it's not so important in our lives. That was in the past. Yes? We may think, well, it doesn't really apply to us anymore. Now, those of you who saw the notification for today, you'll see that the title of today's bayan, the topic, was a call for Hijrah. And that's what I want to do today, inshallah. I want to call for Hijrah. I think really, really, it's essential that we make Hijrah. Okay? But before you start worrying, you're going to have to move out of Wanstead or Redbridge or London or the UK, before you start worrying, I'm not talking about physical hijrah here or geographical hijrah. Yes, that is a specific meaning of hijrah, and the hijrah the Prophet ﷺ was referring to was the hijrah from Mecca to Medina. It was emigration. It was leaving one's land, leaving one's property, community. It was a physical thing. Yes, and the hijrah of Ibrahim alayhi salam, which we may have mentioned with Eid al-Adha, that was a hijrah. He left his people. Yes, and there's many other examples, you see. But in the same way that jihad, for instance, and jahada is the verb, it can mean to fight. Yes, it can mean warfare, but it has a more general meaning. That's the specific meaning. The more general meaning is to strive, to struggle. You know this, yes. And similarly, hijrah, and the verb is hajara, yes, it can mean to emigrate, but it can also mean to abandon, to leave off, to forsake. It's like to give something up and not go back to it. It has all those meanings, like metaphorical meanings, spiritual meanings. You see? And we shouldn't forget this. And the Prophet said, he made this clear. There's a part of a hadith where the Prophet said, وَالْمُهَاجِرُ مَنْ حَجَرَ مَا نَهَى اللَّهُ عَنْهُ. That the muhajir, the one who does hijrah, is the one who abandons that which Allah has forbidden. You see? It's a much more general meaning. And that is the general meaning of hijrah. You see? To abandon, to forsake, to avoid. Yes, to leave off. An area, we might say, of evil or sin. And that's what I'm calling for today. Hijrah, but it is more specific. I think we need to make hijrah from the sinful and wasteful regions of the virtual world. That's what I'm talking about today, inshallah. The internet, in other words. But not just the internet, there are other sort of forms of virtual reality. You know, it's because it's a pandemic. You know, we've been worrying about COVID for years, but what about this pandemic, the addiction that humanity has to the virtual world? I think I can almost guarantee, maybe I'm wrong, but I can almost guarantee that every single one of us here has some sort of unhealthy attachment to some sort of virtual reality. You see? And it's keeping us from our deen. Yes, and more. But let me make one thing clear, and I know there's children here, so you know children are involved in these sorts of things in different ways. Let me make it clear so people don't get the wrong idea. I'm not criticizing the internet or saying the internet is haram. The internet is amazing, actually. I mean, some of you are not old enough to remember a time when we didn't have the internet. Yes, but some of us, we experienced life without internet. We actually experienced life without mobile phones, yes, or without a laptop or a tablet. Believe it or not, you know, we somehow we manage. People say, how can I possibly survive without a mobile phone? You know, I remember when my wife, she was pregnant with our first child, and this is many years ago, I had a pager, just in case there was an emergency. You had a little thing that you used to wear. Yes, it wasn't even as advanced as sending text messages. But that's the sort of thing we had. Yeah, and that's like 25 years ago. So, some of you won't even know this, you see, because you've lived all your lives with internets, with laptops and so on. But there was a time. But it is an amazing thing. The internet, the levels of communication that human beings can have, it's extraordinary now. You know, we can communicate with, say, our relatives from our countries of origin. We can watch the weddings, we can watch the funerals. Yes. In the past, you'd have to send letters, which would take like 7 days to get there, and then another 7 days to get back. And if you're in a hurry, you could send a telegram. You know, and when phones were being used, you'd have to shout down the phones to be heard. You know, it's all changed. And those things have changed extraordinarily with the internet. And even knowledge, I mean, information has increased, of course. They call this the information age. But knowledge as well, access to knowledge. And as Muslims, really, we have so much access now to, for instance, the different commentaries of the Quran. We have access to a hadith, hundreds of thousands of hadith online. You know, we can learn Arabic online. There's so much. So these we're not criticizing them. These are good things, alhamdulillah. You know, but it's also given us ease of access to terrible things. You know, and from an Islamic point of view, to haram things, to forbidden things, to sinful things, to shameful things. Ease of access. Now, these things existed before the internet. Now, I'm going to be straight here, and I know there are children here, but look, really, as parents of those children, you're kidding yourselves if you think your children aren't accustomed to these words in the school playground. That's the trouble, you see. It's just so all over the place now. So universal. So there were things which were around, like pornography, yes, like prostitution, like drugs, alcohol, gambling. These were all around way before the internet. But what we have now is ease of access. Ease of access. You know, a child, and this is happening. There are children in the school playground accessing things which in the past, like in the area of porn, would have been, you could get arrested for. This is a reality. There's no point pretending that this doesn't go on. It happens. What our children are being exposed to, and what effect it must be having on their minds, it's hard to imagine. You know, some totally distorted understanding of the nature of intimacy. Serious things. You know, I work with, as you know, some of you know, I'm a psychotherapist and a marriage counsellor by profession. I work with people, adults, for instance, who, despite having a good marriage and a healthy marriage, they're still getting up in the middle of the night, going down to their laptops and watching the things that they were addicted to. This sort of thing happens. Yes, these are not minor things. So as I say, these things existed before. You know, there were escorts before. Now, people can access escorts. They don't have to go to a particular region of London, so certain dodgy areas, or they can just hook up, excuse the pun, on the internet. Yeah, just on a website. You can find what you want on a website, you see. So these are serious things. And as I say, gambling, people can just gamble at the press of a few clicks and so on, a few buttons. And also, there's very dark areas as well, which we won't go into, but you know, there is the dark web, of course. Now, it's not just those though. These are serious, and these are haram things, sinful things. And we may know this, but you know, there's also some harm that's being caused by things which aren't so obviously problematic. Like you might say, well, what's social media? It's great. You know, you can connect to so many friends. You can connect to relatives, countries of origin. Yes, you can have so much, so many interactions with people. You share so much, and that's another one of the things that you can do within sharing. Now, that's a good thing as well. People are able to share things that you couldn't share before. But yes, you might say, well, what's the harm in that? And what's the harm with a bit of entertainment, like with the kids playing their PlayStations and so on? What is the harm, you might say? Well, one of the things it's doing, you see, it's keeping us away from more important things. That's one of the harms. You know, we can have all these relationships on Facebook or, you know, on WhatsApp groups or Twitter or whatever it is, yes, we can have these relationships, but the time we're spending on those relationships is detracting, yes, it's reducing the time we spend with our own parents, with our own spouses, with our own children. Yeah, the more important relationships are being neglected. And you know, there are households where really the interaction between members of the family are really much less than the interactions that people are having with their mobiles and their laptops and so on. You know, you can go into any restaurant and you can see a table where you've got a family sitting there, no one is talking to each other because they're all on the mobiles. It's serious, and people can't concentrate anymore for long periods. How many people read books nowadays? Yeah, because it's all fast-paced. These things are designed, by the way, I mean, you should know this. These apps, for instance, they're designed by very intelligent people who are being paid, and they admit this. You can watch this, actually. They're being paid to attract and to keep hold of people's attentions. Very clever methods. You know, you think with Netflix, having a countdown to the next episode, it's so clever. Because it's so tempting just to let those 5 seconds go and start the next episode. And they're using terms like binge watching. When I was young, the word binge was a negative word. You know, if someone went on a binge, it means it's something not good. Yes, binge whatever. Now, binge watching is an acceptable term. They're not, yeah, these are intelligent people, clever people who've designed these. We mustn't fall for it. Because we know that this is not all there is to it, you see. Yes, if we believe that when you die, that's it, it's all over. I've said this before. I mean, if you're an atheist, if you don't believe in God, and you don't believe in Akhirah, don't believe in afterlife, yes, it makes some sense, doesn't it, to just maximize your enjoyment, maximize your pleasure. Yes, to run to that which Shaitan might be calling us to, even if it's sinful or haram or it's a crime. People will do this. But for us as Muslims and believers, inshallah, you know, we believe in Allah, we believe in Akhirah. We can't spend our time, yes, on things which are keeping us away from that which is more important. Now, I'm just going to end on something which it occurred to me just a few weeks ago. I was just calculating something, and alhamdulillah, this came into my head. And when I came into my head, I couldn't believe it. I thought I'd made a mistake in my calculations. And I'll just share this with you, just leave you with this, inshallah. That, you know, imagine just wasting 1 hour of our time, just wasting, not even sinning. Let's say it's some sort of YouTube recommendation or some sort of Netflix series. And I'm saying let's say it's not haram, it doesn't contain sinful elements. Let's say we're watching this, or we're just wasting an hour, let's say, or playing some sort of video game, wasting 1 hour. Now, how much does this add up to? All right? Well, 1 hour a day is, of course, 365 hours a year. And let's round it down. Yeah, let's say 350, just to round it down. 350 hours a year, just 1 hour a day, okay? How much does an average person work? I mean, people who go to, or a student, a full-time student, how much time do they spend? Well, an average person works for, let's say, 35 hours a week. I think that's a fairly acceptable figure. Now, at 35 hours a week, to waste just 1 hour a day, 350 hours a year, 35 hours a week, that's 10 weeks, isn't it? 10 weeks is 2.5 months. So look what's being said, and this is the shocking bit. It means that if we are wasting just 1 hour a day, just wasting 1 hour a day, it means it's the equivalent of going to work for 2.5 months of the year and doing nothing. It's like we go into our offices, let's say, and just sit around for 2.5 months, and then we start working. Yes, it's not a flawed calculation. This is a correct calculation. I couldn't believe it at first. How can this be? But it is. Now, which employer would accept you not working for 2.5 months at all, and then getting paid for the whole year? Or which school? I mean, it's like the equivalent of going for a year at school or at university, and for the first term, let's say, doing nothing. That's what it adds up to. Now, that's just wasting time. Imagine if we're spending 1 hour a day in sin, watching something haram or doing something that's haram. sinful on the internet. That's also going to add up to 2.5 months. And if we're doing it for 2 hours a day, that's 5 months in a year. 5 whole months, working months, yes, spent in sin. It's very serious. You see, it adds up. And we know this. The Prophet ﷺ said, you see, we can look at this positively as well. Imagine if we spend 1 hour a day just doing good deeds. That will also add up to 2.5 months of good deeds, working months I'm talking about. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the acts which are most loved by Allah, the consistent ones, even if small. So it all adds up, but the sinful things add up as well. Okay, we'll bring it to a close, inshallah. So really, it is a call for hijrah, but in that metaphorical sense, in that spiritual sense, to move away from these regions of evil and sin or wastefulness. Now, inshallah, next time I'll make some suggestions as to how we can do this, because it's all very well saying this, but we need the tools and the methods, but we haven't got time to discuss that today. Except I'll end on this. You know, Surah Al-Asr, just keep this in mind, to go away with this, inshallah, that we're told, Wal-Asr, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Wal-Asr, Innal Insana Lafi Khusr, Illa Alladhina Amanu wa Amilu Salihat wa Tawasaw bil Haqq wa Tawasaw bis Sabr. By time, you see, Allah is swearing by time. It's like highlighting the importance of time. The clock is ticking. We have just passed another Islamic year. This is a new Islamic year. Yes, time is ticking. So he's swearing by time. Indeed, man is in a state of loss. This is the default state. Yes, except those who have faith and do good deeds and urge one another to the truth and urge one another to patience. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه غفور رحيم.